All right, it's 6:02. We'll go ahead and call the public meeting to order. First item would be public comments for items not on the agenda for discussion, not action. Any public comments? Well, if you stand right up here, please. And is the second owl working, Chip? Either one. Okay, so you can stand right here, about 6 feet away from this one, or over there, about 6 feet away from that.
Okay,
Right here.
I hope this is the right time of the meeting to make a request for later agenda.
Okay.
Not, you've got a big agenda tonight, a very important thing. And I would like to see put on the agenda. Is it working?
Back up a little bit.
And just. I would like the select board to put on the agenda year-round or affordable housing,
Okay.
an update on what is happening.
Okay.
Specifically, it would be good to know the assessment of town properties in terms of what may be possible.
Okay. We will put that on a future agenda. Thank you. All right, any other items for discussion? All right, moving along to item 3 on the agenda, town reports.
Hello, everybody. So under, the town administrator report, there's just a few things worth mentioning. So the storm damage update, on January 26th, Nima and Iman, as well as Bob Ernest, Rob Monroe, and myself over on the island, showing them the municipally owned damage that had happened as a result of the 2 storms in January. Since then, a lot of information has been gathered. They have received that information, and they have been in contact a couple of times just for some minor follow-up things. But at this point, the town is waiting for a determination whether Cumberland County met the threshold for damages, which is in, I believe it's 2.4 million for damages, to determine whether then the federal government can step in. So we don't know that information yet, and I will share that with the board as soon as we have any additional information. Any questions about that? The next thing is the renovation update. So last Friday was the last day. The contractors are done. It took them 2 weeks to the day to renovate the town office. It looks great. Everything is now out of the Ross room and in the town office. The Ross room got thoroughly cleaned this weekend. So it is back in functioning space, and the fire department was able to have their train in there last night. We are a couple weeks out still on the furniture that we have coming. We set up a couple of the clerks in the front still have the desks, so we can get rid of those. So we'll be able to make kind of unpack what doesn't need to go in desks. Right now, the way the numbers look, well, the costs were slightly above what was initially quoted. It is coming in under the voted budget. And there should be, you know, still a decent cushion there, so that's great news. So we're excited about that and ready to set Any questions about?
I popped in when Gail was cleaning and just looked at it. It does look great. Is your new office space in the back room?
Yeah.
And then the other 2 spaces, Is that where some other people are gonna be working?
Yeah, so the way the layout is now, when you first walk in, you have the clerk and the town clerk, deputy clerk in the front area, like they always have. And when you go around, that first room that you enter, that used to be the town administrator, is now an open space. On either side of the wall, there is going to be desks, and that's where we're going to have the code enforcement officer, harbor master, tax assessor. And those are gonna be kind of mobile stations for, you know, for them to work on, because none of those positions are full-time. Then when you walk in directly across from where the entrance is now to the rostrum, there's a space, that's where we're gonna have an L-shaped desk for the bookkeeper. And then you walk in further and the town administrator desk is now, office is now in the far right-hand corner.
No,
So-
and you you have access in and out of the kitchen?
Yes, yeah, so we have access into the rostrum and, we're able to lock the town office from the town office side. So when we leave, we close it, so people from the rostrum can't enter into the town office outside of business hours.
Mhm.
And then what we did is we had a similar lock installed for the fire department, so it's closed from the fire department side. So when we're in the office utilizing the rostrum, we don't have access to go play with the fire trucks.
Great, thank you.
The next thing is the audit update. So I did get in touch with the auditors. They had received the last bit of our information. They told me that we will have it by the end of this week. So it does seem like there was a couple week delay from when they initially said it, but I reassured them that it really needs to be available for us to have at the next meeting. They said that is not going to be a problem, so that will be something that I'm assuming will be on the agenda for the next meeting. Any questions about that? And then the last thing on the town administrator report is that my work software. So I have been sitting in on weekly calls with Tammy, the current code enforcement officer. We're providing them with information that they need to create this site that is going to be suited best for this town and its needs around the code enforcement officer, building permits, electrical permits, and things like that. The code enforcement officer is very adamant that this is up and running before the busy season starts. And so we are meeting them an hour once a week. And during that time, they're kind of asking us questions and showing us their layouts and making sure that based on the permitting system that the town currently has, that information is properly incorporated into that. The one question that I did have is that the board had voted for the payment of this out of the code enforcement office budget. And so I was just hoping that I could get a little bit more specifics about which line item. There's only two, when there's really training and salaries. And so I just wanted to be clear, since I wasn't here when the board made that motion, that is where this software is going to come out for payment.
I think the understanding was that it would come out of labor based on the absence that we had and some extra budget there. Mark?
I think we decided that we were gonna go ahead and try to have you take it out of salaries, thinking that we may be able to make it with the way that code enforcement has transformed over the last few months.
Okay, all right, that's good, that helps. As far as the town administrator report, that's all I have. There wasn't a treasurer's report in this particular, meeting, but I did put in the latest, reserve account information, as well as that standard expense and revenue summary report, so that you have an idea and get to see a little bit more frequently as far as where the expenditures stand. And then there's also a code enforcement officer and a public works report in there as well. If you you have any questions about any of those.
Mark?
Just very quickly, where do you think we stand with reconciliation of the finances?
Right now, it's 2 months behind.
Thank you.
Carol?
On the contingency budget, it looks like we haven't spent anything, but I believe we have, right?
So it has been voted on, most of the contingency, was voted, appropriated for the repair down at the end of Solis Road. But we have not paid that bill yet. That was being waited until the project had concluded, and so when that happens, then, I will come out of there.
And then just one other thing on the capital accounts. At the last town meeting, we assigned them account numbers and we cleaned up the names. And I would ask that we start showing the capital accounts using that format, since we did modify. Right?
Yes, so with, the way that the modification, was made, and I brought, the copy with me, was we put in the whole, chart in the town warrant, which hadn't been done in the past. And the numbers that are, in the town warrant are the numbers that are on the capital. The way that this system works for Trio, for the capital on Trio, it only works, it only shows what was appropriated as an expense for that fiscal year, but it doesn't show the money coming in and out of those accounts. Which is why the copy that you receive of the reserve expense accounts is provided to you. What I can do is contact the bank to see if the bank can change the fund names to better reflect what was voted on, to see if that might be helpful. But with Trio, I think I'm very limited with.
So you're saying that unless we had an expenditure last year, it's not gonna show up?
It's not gonna show on the Trio report, it shows it on the Machia Savings Bank, so if you look at the one that I provided you.
Yeah.
On a monthly basis, it will see any withdrawals and deposits, so the month of, December, we had a withdrawal out of the new town office account for $735. Deposits typically only happen at the beginning of the fiscal year.
But so on the capital, so on page 11,
You're talking on the Trio report?
yeah, so
Yeah.
there's nothing shown, no expense.
It's not going to, because,
So where is where is the 700 shown?
so the Machia Savings Bank statement. that
So
you got?
that's 735?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other thing about the Machia Savings Bank account is it's kind of hard to read. I don't know why it's so light. I mean, it's kind of fading away on at least on my copy. Maybe it's just mine. But it would be nice to, correct the names so that they are the same. So we,
I can see if the bank would be
yeah.
able to adjust the names.
So if it's not showing up on the, 9,000 capital improvement on the tree report, it doesn't mean there's no money in there. We have to go and look at the Machia savings.
Yes, yeah, so with the way that the budgeting works, with the general ledgers and the reserve accounts we have set up, it only, this report will only show what was budgeted for it. It's not an expense or a revenue account, so it's a little bit different.
Other questions? Vicky, anything else?
For the reports, no. No.
Right, moving on, regular business. Item 24-015 to discuss the emergency management director role and how the town can improve in major storm events and take any necessary action. What this is basically about is an expectation that we're gonna see more and more frequent events like the events we've had so far this winter. And how can we better set up our organization to deal with the rapid amount of information gathering, analysis, and recording that has to take place in order to meet the very tight timelines that Cumberland EMA, Maine EMA, and FEMA put in front of us. So our fire chief, who's also in charge of rescue, is by title in charge of he's the emergency management director. But because he doesn't have the time to do that kind of data collection, he's got a couple of full-time jobs, and he also does a wonderful job serving in fire and in rescue for us. We would like to discuss the possibility, or was suggested that we discuss the possibility of a position within fire and rescue who could focus on that data gathering and data preparation, as opposed to what's happened in the past, which is to let that fall on the town staff, which then means the business of the town has to get set aside when we have these disasters. There's no great way to budget a dollar amount because we don't know how many storms we're going to have and don't know what the requirement's going to be. But I'll stop talking at that point and see if anyone on the board has any thoughts or comments about the concept. Mark?
Have you, Avika, talked with Ralph about this
Yep.
possibility?
Yep, I have. Have you had a conversation with Ralph about it?
I had a general conversation, just kind of trying to understand what his role was, how he got assigned to it, what the process has been historically to make sure that when I was collecting all this information, that I wasn't overstepping, or that it was somebody that was doing it when it, at the time fashion that it needed to be done, so.
So the conversations I had with Ralph, he thought it was a good idea. He wanted to be very careful about how the role got filled if we created a role. And he had some ideas in terms of people, how they fit within the current organization, that kind of thing.
And so right now, unless I'm mistaken, there's a part-time administrative assistant position in that department, and one or two people are filling that right
That
now.
Platinum is the administrative assistant that fills the role.
And so my next question is, did either of you get the vibe from Ralph that there would be someone either interested or even available in the department for this part-time stipend, whatever it be?
He thought there might be, yeah.
Okay,
He had some initial conversations and there was interest, but it's,
yeah. And basically, I'm reading this memo on the back of the one that says February 1st, 2024 at the top. On the back of that, from Michael Durgan, I believe. He writes that different towns handle this type of thing differently. For instance, Harrison is a small town, they budget 8,000. Long Island, which is right next to us, budget's 2,000. Harpswell, which is big, budget's 1,500. And another one budget's 500. So like you say, it's all over the place. So we should probably, pick some sort of a number to get it started, if we're going to get it started in this next budget season. Right. And I would think something like 3,000 to 5,000 might be a good starting area. I don't know.
one way we could look at it, if Vika could look back, for example, at how many hours she spent gathering information for these two wind events. 24 hours. And we applied a dollar figure to that. And let's say we decide to budget for 3 such events in a year, or 2, or 1, or 6, or whatever.
Yeah.
Then that gets us to a budget number.
Yeah,
And then the pay, I wouldn't consider it a stipend. I would consider it to be an hourly thing as
Yeah.
needed. So that any unspent budget money then goes back into the the fund.
And then obviously the actual safety management and preparation would still be performed by Ralph and or some other town staff.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts from the board on that topic? Public, any thoughts on that topic? I think at this point, our next step would be to carry that conversation forward when we get into departmental budgets and discuss adding something there. Steve, step up, please.
Oh, sorry. So I took pictures of the, where do I go?
Right over here, so the owl can see you.
Okay, I took pictures of the hook during that storm.
Yep.
And then Island Institute contacted me, through Erno, and the only point of my comment is, they wanted baseline information to gauge the storm, documentation of the storm impact against, so. In addition to doing storm response, you may want to go collect baseline photos or documentation of some sort that's relevant to whatever you have to submit when a storm happens.
Good thoughts.
So
Yeah, thank you. All right, any other comments? David?
Just curious what the job description would look like. What do we tell this person their duties are gonna be and what their responsibilities are? And how do we develop that?
Yep. It needs to be developed. It would include things like data collection, gathering of budgetary information. It seems the way things work with Maine EMA, Cumberland EMA, and to some degree with FEMA, they want very quickly shotgun information. So have your town engineer or the equivalent thereof go around and come up with some rough estimates to get at this $2.4 million threshold kind of thing.
Would Vika's last 24 hours be more or less a job description then?
Yes.
Yeah, so, and that's one of the, I think, reasons why this is really coming up, because this is, in the last year, this is the third time that this is the second time, 2 major storms, that this is happening, so it's taken away a huge chunk of time, especially during budget season. Personnel, renovation, that kind of had to come to a pause for this. When the visit happened on the 26th, the 31st is when they needed all of the information. So we happened to be one of the unlucky ones that were on their visit list from municipality towards the end, which means that our window to turn around and provide them all that information was very short. Luckily, having gone through it last year, we knew what the expectations were going to be, because last year we really scrambled. We didn't know the process. That's where I was able to, with much assistance from our fellow, create the folders for all this, gather all that information. So when they came, we had everything for them. And so now it's been fairly slow because it's just very, very small follow-up things, like they asked me for, copy of the town insurance. So little things like that. But if the Cumberland County meets the threshold, a lot more work is going to take place. So these 24 hours that I estimated, but then we had Public Works, we had, that was just the time that I put in. I do have hours that other employees put in as well. This is just the mitigation part. Then you have the recovery aspect of it. But then also we're gonna have to collect a lot more information, engineering studies, things like that.
It seems to me we should document what those responsibilities are.
Yeah, and also document the fact that there's a bit of a firewall or a transition where it goes from early estimating and data gathering to hardcore engineering, at which point it comes back to this body.
Right.
And we start working with engineering firms, road contractors to get real estimates.
And
real designs.
I basically have a folder that when we drove, I wrote notes, and then I took those notes and made the estimates. I'm just putting everything in there, and then photocopies of timesheets of, the harbor master, the time that he put in, or Public Works. So then when we do have to present more information, you know, it's somewhat readily available to go through versus trying to figure out who did and worked what time, so.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right. Mika will talk later about
Okay.
turning some thoughts into some sort of a job description thing at some point. And then we can work with Ralph. All right, next item, to discuss road signs and take any necessary action. So a few of our one stop sign in particular, I've noticed is gone. I think maybe Jackie or someone down in that area made note of the fact that no, actually it came from Kathleen in the mail carrier. She was driving up from the Chandler's Wharf and one truck was coming up the road. There's no stop sign there. Her guess was that it was a driver who wasn't used to Shebig. No stop sign, he rolled on through. So the stop sign that had been defaced with yellow paint is now missing. I haven't noticed any other ones that are missing, but I haven't had time to do a full audit yet. So the question is, does the board want to ask Public Works to replace that sign? Do we want to continue on our path of relentless sign replacement? Mark?
Not to be a know-it-all, but they've replaced the sign.
Sweet.
And they've also replaced the handicap sign down at Chandler's Wharf.
Okay.
So we're in good shape. I took a ride around the island after that and looked at the areas where people should be stopping / slowing down to a, you know, manageable speed at least. And, the island's in pretty decent shape with stop signs, so I think we're okay for now.
So they had enough extras, it sounds like, that they were able to.
They had a couple extras, yeah, so I asked them to put those two signs up.
Okay. Any thoughts from the public before we move on? Okay. Thank you. Thanks for being on top of that, Mark. Item 14-017, to discuss the stone wharf and its stability after these storms and to take any necessary action. And when we made up this agenda, we were waiting for a proposal from Weston Sampson, which just came through. They were waiting on survey data, actual GIS data from Wright Pierce from the initial measurements of the pier. And the thought is to take a visual look, but also a data-driven actual points in space survey look at where the stone pier is and how it fared through these two big events. As most of you know, the big action was on the east side of the island, not back here. But as most of you know, the pavement took a beating and there's some question as to what might have happened under that visible structure. So we have a proposal in front of us. Again, this just came through recently. It got added to the website today. And there's a copy in front of all the board members. Carol, did you have anything you wanted? I know you're not wanting to talk much. Did you have anything you wanted to say about this?
Well, the urgency is that they are trying to capture the extreme low tide conditions next week. There's a minus 1.6 and 1.2, so they're trying to get those tides so they can see as much of the structure as possible. So that's why it's particularly rushed. We did discuss this with Maine Emergency Management, and they did indicate to us that they thought this kind of activity could be eligible for reimbursement under FEMA. No guarantees, but it's a possibility. And so Wright Pierce in 2021 installed markers on the top of the pier to be monitored periodically to see if there's any movement. We have not surveyed those since then, and so this seemed like a good opportunity to do that. And then they would also do a structural evaluation from the side. I will say to just briefly that the Wright Pierce study was basically a static loading study where so much weight is on top of the pier, and does the pier have enough strength to withstand that? And the answer was yes, but the type of action that you get with storm events and hurricanes is more of a wave runoff and wave energy action, and that's on the sides of the pier. It's a very different kind of assessment. We are having a modeling study that's gonna be able to give us some of those values, so it seemed like it's worth it to get sort of the three-dimensional assessment, because right now we basically only have a loading assessment and no sidewall kind of assessment. Put it in sort of basic terms.
Yeah. So to reiterate, the reason for having this be on the agenda tonight is because of that upcoming tide and the fact that Weston was able to get this survey company that does these kinds of surveys to commit to coming out here on those two low tides. They will have to spend the night on the island in order to execute the work because the low tides are very early in the morning. We've had some volunteers step up and offer a place to stay. So any other thoughts from the board, questions relative to the proposal? David and then Mark.
Well, it always bothers me when I see blacked out spaces. I wonder what was here and why was it blacked out? And then I'd like to make a motion.
That's how it arrived to us.
I think that's
the end of
their,
that.
I think that's their proposal to Weston and Sampson, and maybe they blacked out their.
What they're charging them?
No, I don't think it's, no, their costs are embedded in the.
It is. Yeah, I'm just curious. Well, I move
We
that,
can ask if you.
I doubt that there's anything earth shaking there. I move that, we proceed with the services of Weston and Sampson as outlined in this memo.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? And then we'll come back to Mark for discussion.
I'll second it.
Okay. So discussions, Mark, you had a thought?
So the assessment that Wright Pierce did, Carol, I think you reiterated correctly, was more for down-bearing concern.
Right.
It wasn't for the actual condition overall of the structure.
It wasn't about the structure being able to withstand wave and, sideways energy. It's basically extra weight. And it's definitely adequate to even, they would have to put pilings in to do the type of concrete structure they were suggesting. But the underlying materials are hard enough that it's not gonna sink. But I had intuitively felt the same, and fortunately, the engineer for Woods Hole Group kind of laid it out in his email saying that that's really not the type of loading you're concerned about. You're really concerned about storm-related, wave energy runoff. And more likely for us, a hurricane that might come up that way, or a storm that's, not the two storms that we've had.
Yeah. Without sounding too negative, it's another 33 grand. And we've had a bunch of engineering studies, maybe not on a specific structure itself, but in this town that we haven't done a lot with after we've had the study. So I hope that if we engage this full engineering assessment of this facility, it gives us some value of why we did it so that we can explain to the taxpayers. It took another 33,000 and we had this assessment done, and now we can proceed with X, Y, or Z. You see what I'm saying? And if some of it is reimbursable, and I'm not counting on that, by the way, but if some of that's reimbursable, or we can apply for it to be reimbursable because of the nature of what we just had come at us, then that's great. So, you know me, I took a walk around the whole facility today, assessed it in the dire style, and good, bad, or ugly. The facility doesn't look bad to me. Yeah, I gotta tell you, I'm not saying we don't need to have anybody look at it, but I am saying I was surprised how well it still looks. Yeah, it's losing fill down where you get onto the boat and it continues to droop. So, I guess I'll a little bit begrudgingly go along with this, but I would like at some point to have this become value added.
Value added to the further process, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, any other comments from the board? I would just offer one more comment before we vote. There is in that study from Wright Pierce that after doing the boring of the stone pier and an engineering analysis of its stability, the report that came back at top level said it's stable. At the detail level, they did say it should be monitored on an ongoing basis. It's a very complex structure. I think this chunk of monitoring feeds to that original assessment and hopefully says, yes, it still looks stable or not, but it's consistent with what was in the fine print of the earlier study. So, Vika.
If you do make a motion, can you amend specifying which, where the funds will be coming from? Which I'm assuming to be the stonework,
Does our Stone Wharf Reserve Fund,
Yeah.
would that be the place?
Yeah.
915, yes.
Yeah, yeah, so amended.
Is that okay with your second, Carol?
Can I just ask one more quick thing?
Sure.
Although it may not apply to the work that Weston and Sampson is going to do in this assessment, they will certainly, after looking at the Wright Pierce assessment, be aware that part of the structure sits on ledge, part of it sits on hard pan clay, and part of it sits on logs.
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah, and probably a few bathtubs and car farms. Yeah. Okay, any other comments? Okay, there's a motion on the floor. It's been seconded. All in favor? 4. Thank you. Any comments from the public? Item 24-018, to discuss the solar array purchase options and take any necessary action. I think the situation is that this is a time at which we are contractually able to execute the purchase of the solar panels that were installed, Steve, what is it, 8 years ago, 9 years ago? 2018, 6 years ago almost. And if we buy them this year, then we get full benefit from the panels as owned. Whereas currently we're paying a rate of, I believe, 9 cents per kilowatt hour for the electricity that we're using, which is less than market, but we're still paying as part of paying off the tax. I think if we wait a year, the purchase price goes down by a few $1,000s. And if we wait another year, the purchase price goes down by another few $1,000s. But we lose, quote unquote, the lower cost of electricity for those few years. Is that summary consistent with your understanding? That sound right to you, Steve? If you
One correction, the owls are supposed to be 360.
You gotta have to get closer there. You can stand over there this
Okay.
time, when you'll be closer to Carol, you know.
I know,
It's your own risk.
Disclosure, I work for Revision Energy. Revision Energy manages the arrays.
Yeah.
So right now, that's the correction, that right now, you're in contract year 6, so you're paying 13.96 cents per kilowatt hour going forward. And the market rate is 17.4 cents.
Thank you.
So you're saving, 4 cents, 3.5 cents. Last year, you were paying 13.6 cents and the market rate was 24.6 cents. So last year, you're making out like bandits. And that has to do with the market rates of electricity. But over the first 5 years, the project went live on December 20th, 2018. So we sort of ignored the few days in 2018 and done all the math from 2019 to the end of 2023. And over that period, the town saved $23,930 versus buying electricity from the utility. And that was the difference between the PPA stands for Power Purchase Agreement, so difference between the rate at which you buy the solar power versus what you would have paid if you were on default supply from the utility. And just to be clear, those are average annual rates. It's not worth doing the precise math. So you take the rate changes twice a year, you take the average. There was 4 or 5 months in 2022 where the meter, there's 2 meters there, the utility meter and the private meter. The private meter sends its information out by cell phone signal. And it was a level 3 cell phone signal, and those quit being serviced. So, because of the global supply chain, they couldn't get a replacement meter until 5 months later. So there was about 4 or 5 months where the solar was generating power, you're getting credit from the utility, but Revision wasn't billing you because it didn't have the data. And it elected simply not to bill, rather than they could have estimated the data, but they I was off sailing at the time, so I don't know anything about it. And if you look at the last page in the cash flow model, and I have the model on the computer now, so I can change the inputs if you'd like me to, like if you want to look at leverage. But essentially, there's a 2 color coordinated columns. One is the PPA savings, and which is sort of orange, and the other is the if you buy the product outright is the green. And so you can compare, and it just assumes everything increases in price by 2% a year. So there's an annual 2% escalator. You change that to 1% or 5%, whatever you want. But essentially, if you stay in the PPA, you don't have any ownership risk of the equipment. It's the Revision has that. And so if something breaks, Revision pays to fix it. At a 2% annual increase in inflation, the town would save $86,000 over the life of the project. If you buy it outright now and you don't pay the PPA rate, you get the entire 17.4% savings minus your operating costs, which are basically insurance and electrical O&M. If you buy it outright using all the same assumptions, the town would save $203,000. So, you know, if you take the risk and own it, the rewards are greater.
Right.
So long, and that includes, by the way, assumed one-time replacement of all the inverters. So I just tried to do the math, show you guys the math there to help you with the decision. I want to make the point, and this is not in my company's interest, but it's the right point. If you buy it in November, where you paid for 10 months of electricity and you're just saving 2 months, it's not worth it. If you buy it in March, it's very much worth it. So you should schedule when the town buys it based on, or ask for a price reduction to reflect that you're, 10 months of the year has already gone by, so you're only saving 2 months. And I'd be more than happy to help Vika or whoever needs to figure that out in a fair way.
Okay, all right, thank you. One question, the expenditure of the, $80,000 resulting in the savings of $220,000. There is a time lag, net present value calculation to be done there. If we pay 88 now for a savings of 220 over the life of the system, the net present value of that 220 is less than 220, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and we can do another column on here and do this kind of cash flow.
Yep. Appreciate
Easy
it.
enough.
Thanks, Steve. Comments from the board, questions from the board? Mark?
Could I address Steve?
Please.
So Steve, you basically just told us that if we intend to buy this out in 24 this year instead of 25 that it is planned, you recommend next month.
There's 2 choices. The sooner you buy it, Revision offered you a price of $86,000.
Yeah.
And, sorry, $84,000.
Yeah.
If you buy it halfway through the year, I would ask for a commensurate reduction in that price reflecting, so it'll go down by $1,000 or $2,000, in other words.
Okay. Thank you. And then it says here, if we purchase it outright, then we need to pay for annual operational and maintenance costs and insurance. Correct?
Correct. And those, in the spreadsheet, we use the pricing revision we give you so that we're modeling the cost of owning it.
Okay. I had another question. Oh, this is not revision or Steve Henchman's problem. Right now, in our reserve account, we have $79,107.55. My point is, if we decide to purchase this before town meeting of June, really before July 1 is the accurate statement, we would have to come up with money in an existing budget to the tune of $5,000 to $6,000 minimum.
That's great. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Other questions, comments from the board? Carol?
Yeah, I would ask that you maybe send this on to the climate action team too, and have them provide their thoughts on the project and purchasing and Steve's. You know, that's kind of one of their roles, is to help advise the select board on those things. And we have some pretty sharp people on that board.
Yep.
They're just advisory only, but it would be good to have them look at it. I think they are very pro alternative energy, but you know, I think it might make a difference to have them look at it. I think it's a matter of timing and our resources and, you know, and the numbers, Steve, you're saying you're using for O&M and the inverter replacement costs are numbers that come from, so are you saying this would be what we would contract for O&M with you guys?
If you bought an O&M contract from revision, it's a 6-year contract, and in year one, it's the full, it's like 1,800, and then in year 2, it's like 600, and then year 3 is like 300. So they're different. The overall over 6 years, it works out to be 1,200 a year. It's staggered differently, reflecting there's a more intense inspection in the very beginning, and then once we have, know everything we want to know about the project, then the follow-on years, so long as the generation is there, the inspections are lighter. And it's just a way of saving you money. So that's our current pricing. That's the $1,200, and the insurance price, that is what we get when we buy insurance on it. The town probably has a pretty comprehensive policy. Your rider might even be less.
Okay.
And
then the town already does the landscaping.
Okay.
And the 18630 is the inverter replacement?
That is assuming 30 cents a watt to replace all the inverters. And in real life, that'll, an inverter, 1 will fail in year 7, and then 3 fail in year 12 or whatever. So that number is just stuck there, but it's for purposes of the project life cycle cash flow analysis. It doesn't really matter that much which year it happens in. 30 cents a watt is a conservative number. Obviously, we don't know in 2033 what inverters will cost.
Okay, Mark.
I wouldn't mind hearing from the Climate Action Committee myself. My initial gut reaction to this is to head towards a direction of purchasing this out earlier than anticipated originally. And if we have to have it happen with town meeting, funds available if passed by town meeting voters July 1, that's fine. We could have a conversation about maybe a possibility of lowering the purchase cost before that. And that's my initial thought on it. I think this has worked out well so far.
Any comments from the public? Dave?
Can I stand on that point?
Sure.
Sure, either one.
Take your pick.
There's a former 7 or 8 year employee of revision. I know that this is Steve's baby, and he's not doing it for revision, he's doing it for Shabby. And I would count his goal, any of his recommendations, because he is the expert on this. And if he says this is gonna save you money, I don't know who's on the climate bit, but this guy's the pro, and he's gonna save the town money, so I would go with whatever he says.
Thank you. Carol?
Steve, do you know whether the CRP grant funds used for these kinds of purchases?
CRP meaning,
The climate resiliency program and the governor's office grant funds, people are using them for solar arrays.
that's a great idea. I don't know. I've not, read the grant criteria.
So that's one thing I think is worth exploring.
Okay. Is that something the climate action team could take a look at?
Yep.
Is it the sense of the board that we should take this to the CAT and bring it up on a future agenda after they've had a chance to look it over? Do we need a motion for that, or is it the sense of the board?
It is mine.
David, any thoughts?
No, I think that's a good step.
Good evening.
Direction.
Yeah, okay. Let's do that then. Let's, get a copy of all of the spreadsheets that Steve shared with the town to the climate action team, and also ask them to, investigate the option of a CRP grant funding of the purchase price, if that's a possibility.
Is that something you want me to do, or Carol is
No,
that?
I can, the
No,
committee,
to connect with the committee.
why don't you send it to them, copy me too, but, and just say the select board asked you to look at this and.
Sounds right.
If you would copy me, then I can be.
Yeah, and maybe Steve will end up attending a meeting.
Just wanted to point out the electric use data is also in this report, so the last 5 years of use by each of the town meters is there, so you can see that town energy use is declining. It's about 13% less than it was in 2015.
Would we relate that to, weather, temperature variations, that kind of thing?
The largest reduction was Chandler's Cove, which is probably LED lighting. Town garage was next, the town hall after that, and the school, so.
Heat pumps would have gone up. That's interesting. Yeah. Okay.
All of those facilities did upgrades.
Yeah. Okay, good news. Thanks, Steve.
Can you repeat the name of that grant?
CRP.
You could just call it a CRP grant.
Okay.
There's maybe other sources, but I think they could look into grant funding sources. That could be something they can check into. They just did a great study, so they have some of the same numbers Steve has.
All right. I did.
My public speaking skills are really rusty, but I just wanted to emphasize that I am a former employee of revision, and I have no ties to revision. And I was stressing again, this guy is probably the foremost expert in the state on these public. He probably paved the way on these public things, so anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 24-019 to discuss the main DOT infrastructure grant and take any necessary action. Carol, could you bring us up to speed on that?
Yeah, I'm not sure why. We submitted a grant application, last Friday. When Sansel gave some backup numbers for it, and, I don't know what the timeline is. I think it's gonna be very competitive, given all the storm damage. We submitted under the design phase, and to answer sort of Mark's question, what we hope would come out of that is some actual physical designs for actual improvements on the stone pier, including some of the parking pavement. And so I think this data that we're collecting, I don't think we'd want to go forward with those. I'm talking about the construction expenditures without the information we'll be collecting potentially this month. So, but those would be to get a 30% design so we could apply for funding through the DOT programs. And we've had multiple meetings with DOT where they've said, you've got to get it to that stage. Right, Pierce's proposal to sort of do a complete, new pier on top of the stone pier at 15 to 18 million is difficult to phase in. It's a brand new, totally, one-time constructed structure. So we have been exploring a more phased approach, which DOT said, I would say, without a question, that is the way we have to go. We cannot expect to build something 10 or 15 million out of the gate. I think one of the things as a group, when we get into the capital planning, we should look at some scenarios about kind of how we're gonna fund some of these really large projects and, what kind of bonding can we think of? How can we phase them? Are we talking 3 to 5 million increments? I mean, there are other reasons to phase the stone pier because sea level rise projections are just that, projections, and sort of not putting all your eggs in one basket on a projection is a better way to go. So I think that is kind of the strategy we're taking here. And I think DOT was supportive of that approach. I think it's more likely to be kind of affordable in the long run for the community. It would be very difficult to fund a $15 million project out of the gate for the town, but even if we got all kinds of money, it's just not feasible.
And Carol, with this grant, if we get the grant, isn't there likely a match, but we don't?
Yeah, so we put a match in there. We were supposed to say where it was coming from, so it could either come from the grant match or the Stone Pier Fund. So we asked for the full amount of the 50 grand and we estimated the match to be 15 rather than a minimal match of like 2,000 because I think that improves our chances. And it's also more appropriate for the scope of the project. So we'll see what happens. Last time they handed out for very large grants, 2 to 4 million. Now they're only handing out $50,000 grants and $125,000 for construction. So they've really changed the scope of these, but then the governor just the other night said that she's going to dump in a lot more money. So I think all we're trying to do is position ourselves to get funded by one of these other grant programs for some actual construction out there. And I think we want to be able to apply for that in 24. And I think that's kind of the marching orders we gave Weston and Sampson. So I agree with you, Mark. It's kind of enough engineering. So.
Yeah.
But we are at a point where we can apply for funding for a project, unfortunately.
And if we get this grant and we have to match it, we're getting 50, we're providing 15, we're getting $65,000 worth of work for 15 from us. And that work gets us closer to 30% design standard, which is what we need to start asking for the big construction money. That's kind of where we are in the process. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mark?
But no guarantees.
Yes.
Yeah, and I agree, even though Wright Pierce did a good job for us and worked well with us and gave us a couple of decent draft designs. Their design is a little bit complicated. I didn't agree with some of it. And after Carol showed it to one or two people at DOT, they solidified a couple of my concerns, but I'm not pretending I'm an engineer. So my point is, I'm glad to hear that I think the goal of this town and this board should be a very well thought out phased construction improvement that can be added on to and improved later on by possibly another generation.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Anything else? Comments from the public on that topic? Okay, thank you. Item 24-020 to hear an update on dredging and take any necessary action. Vika, can you give us an update on what we've learned?
Yeah, so the dredging work was done. I was contacted, by, Jordan Macy, who is the gentleman who, has been in charge of handling this for us. And he just provided some basic information. to let us know that, the town really has a decision to make. That is because the dredging that was anticipated to be done in terms of the quantity that was gonna come out of the last part that was due to come out, they weren't able to remove all of it. So at this point, out of the 4,000 pound or 4,000 cubic yards that was anticipated to be removed, 2,100 was able to be removed. That is really as a result of them experiencing some of the similar problems that the old dredging company did, where they were hitting lead and very hard material, the closer they were getting to the stone pier, the more kind of blasting options or more severe equipment would be needed, and they weren't willing to kind of compromise with the structure of that. And so they accepted and finished that job with that, but leaving it to the town to really make a decision as to, so in the packet, what you'll see is some of the drawings showing where some of the areas were not able to be fully dredged. And so the second page where you're seeing the 10-foot proposed depth and then the 8-foot proposed depth, there's a few sections that are, within the 7-foot range when it should be 8 or where it should be 10. And so what the town needs to just determine is whether they want to accept the dredging as is, in which case, the government would accept those areas and kind of make them known on maps that they're shallower than the 10-foot or the 8-foot. With that, then that entire area is still to be maintained by the government. Or the other option is accept it, but with their revised dimension, which that would include potentially instead of a 10, you're putting it down to 8 feet instead of 8 feet, you're putting it down to 6.5 feet, so you're accepting the same depth. And so in talking to him, I asked what the recommendation would be on his behalf, and the recommendation, while it's a town decision, his recommendation would be the first choice that he has suggested in the email was to accept it as is, knowing that there are a few places that weren't able to be fully dredged. But with that, in the future, when they do have to come back, maybe they're able to get them or they have different equipment. Either way, it puts them responsible for that versus us accepting it at a lower depth, in which case that's what they're responsible for. And I think that his recommendation is the appropriate one, because then you're potentially accepting a shallower depth where they can maintain full 8 or 10 feet otherwise, so.
Mark?
I agree with what Vika just said. All that we're doing is accepting the product that has been finished. It doesn't mean that they're gonna come back if it has to be maintained in the future and suddenly dig one of these hard areas that's only 6 or 7 feet down to 8 feet. It doesn't mean that's magically gonna happen, but it also doesn't mean that we need them to do that. I mean, I went in there a couple of times with my boat, with my depth sounder at not a big low tide, but a decent low tide, and low kinds of water by the bird ramp area now. So, and even though the turning radius isn't fully what they thought it was going to be, there's plenty of room to pivot a barge around in there. So I think accepting the product and realizing that it's now the Fed's problem, if there is a problem, if there's funding available, of course, and the red tape doesn't hold them up, blah, blah, blah. I think we just accept it. It's a good job. It's a good channel now. And we're in good shape transportation wise.
Other thoughts from the board? David, and then Carol.
Just wondering what the users of the facility have to say if they've weighed in on this decision. By that, I mean CTC, the barging companies and so forth.
So I did contact any barging companies. The one question that, Jordan had was for CTC, more specifically of when they would be able to access it at a certain time of the year. And when I reached out to Matt actually clarified that during that time, the barge was operating. If that kind of clarifies it.
Thank you.
Carol.
Well, I was gonna say the same thing. I think we should explicitly ask CTC, you know, refer this to them and make sure they understand the situation and have no problems before we accept it. And I guess I can't really tell from the map. So is the pink area the area that didn't meet the requirements?
So if you're looking on this,
Yeah.
the yellow area is the section that was dredged 10 feet.
Right.
The pink area was the 8 feet. And the parts that did meet are these tiny little circles where it's really hard to see on here, but so there's 2 areas in the yellow where one of the areas is 9 feet and one is 7.4. So
Right.
they could get the full 10.
And
And then
where on the stone pier though, that little jog there, where does that land? In other words, you guys are talking about the barge ramp. Is that what this is in front of?
So the barge ramp is towards
farthest
the pink
extension.
area. The yellow area is where the CTC is.
Okay.
And so the majority of it was near that ledge that is where the float is, if you're looking
Yeah,
out, so that's where,
The 10-foot skiff float.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
so I mean, what I think we should do is just pass the information on to CTC and say, we're planning to accept this as is. Do you have any concerns?
He, in conversation with him, he did say that if town wanted to pursue it, the other option was to go back out to bid and to have another company. But obviously, it's just, you're adding hundreds of thousands of dollars on potentially, not getting that. So he just didn't see how that would be feasible, and he wasn't even sure that anybody at that point would even bid for, 5 of those teeny tiny sections.
And does it affect the final cost to us?
So the final cost, if you recall, came in as significantly lower than what we had budgeted. And he, in the discussion, he wasn't really able to provide it any cheaper. My understanding was that no, because they still came out, they still were here. I didn't really get a clear answer.
So it's more of a lump sum kind of payment rather than a quantity of dredge material?
From us
Yeah.
that's what it seemed to me.
Did I hear you correctly? They basically dredged about half as much material as they had expected to?
Yeah.
On round 2, right?
Yeah, on round.
Yes.
But given the location of those green circles, it's not as bad as it could be, I would say. And given the location of the yellow versus the pink, where specifically is CTC's dock in the yellow? Is it where that?
So the CTC's dock in the yellow is gonna be closer in this area versus, because if you recall, there is, past the, so they come in, they kind of dock, and then this is where you've got the ramp from, if I remember seeing it, is like kind of right, not the ramp, but the floats,
Yeah,
right around in this area where it cuts.
jogs in, yeah. Okay. So what is the sense of the board? Do we want, Mark, go ahead.
I agree with Carol. I think we should, if that's how we feel, I think we should accept the dredging product as is, realizing that they didn't quite take it down,
Right.
the final 4,000 cubic yards, whatever it was, accept it as the final product, let CTC know that we're preparing to accept it as is, and see if they have any comments or concerns before we do that.
Okay. So we asked Vika to let CTC know that we're preparing to move forward with option one from Jordan's email and give CTC a chance to respond. And if they don't have any objections, then they can go ahead and move forward with option one. Is that what we're saying?
That's what I would do.
Yeah, I agree.
David, work for you?
I agree.
Right? Makes
Yeah,
sense?
and I guess I would ask that if they have concerns, they kind of copy the board.
Yes.
Yeah, I
And,
agree
and
that.
Mark and I are theoretically on this committee and we could meet with them if they're really concerned, you know.
I'll reach out to Matt and talk to him and then see where that conversation takes.
Because when I hear turning basin, then I think it's the ferry turning. Is that correct or am I thinking wrong?
Where the CTC ferry is all within the 10-foot area.
I think the problematic turning basin had more to do with the barging area.
Yeah, it's hard for me to tell because I can't see
That's
this
wrong.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were hoping for some more room for a barge to back out and pivot, but there's plenty of room there. My opinion.
But the proposal to put in a wharf for the commercial fishermen, which they had proposed would require additional dredging below the 10 feet, that probably kills that option, frankly,
Yes.
on the Red Pierce plan.
Yeah.
Which was already, did it once right here told.
Well, no, I think that is a reality,
Yeah.
right?
Okay, any comments from the public on that very complicated topic? All right, moving along, Mr. Maine, might you be here to give us a brief update on the finance committee?
No,
Okay,
yeah, there's not much to say.
okay, well, that'll keep it short.
No, I'm here because Dick is gonna, present something in other business. She had some questions that I just saw 20 minutes ago.
Okay,
So I'm here to answer those.
okay. All right, let's just go ahead and go to that other business. You can do an item?
God, that was quick, yes, give me. So 2 things under other business, both of which may require a motion from you. So the first one, I'll let her, if you're here, you can be the bearer of the good news.
Okay.
Please step up to the owl and you can pick the one in the isolation ward or this one, your choice.
Yeah, I probably already, I gave you that. Could stay away. No, I'm fine. So we, as you know, we've been working on the planks for the boat ramp at Stonewall. And getting them through the state at no cost for the planks. So we need 66 planks, in discussions with them. We came up with, they have 10-foot planks and 12-foot planks available. In the course of things, without waiting for a meeting for the coastal waters, suggested, because the contact there suggested that we go with 10-foot ones. We have about a 21-foot span at the top, and it goes to about 27 feet. So there are options there, but right now what we're proposing and what this is all based on is 66 10-foot, 33, 10-foot planks, which is replaces what's there. So just yesterday, which is why this is coming up in other business, we got a grant letter, we got approved, and we got a grant letter in the mail to get the planks for free. We are required to do the transport. So 66 planks at 1,000 pounds a piece. I talked to Justin today, and he had some rough information from work they've done at the boatyard, that's probably like 3 trips for one of the companies that they work with that actually make these planks and tops them, I think.
Yeah.
So we might be able to contract with them, go out and get them, and people have 3 trips. So, you know, we're talking a significant amount of money to transport. We have
So we
to
have to transport them from the manufacturer, not just from the.
in Richmond.
Okay,
Yeah, they have a yard in Richmond.
yep.
the state has. And I gave you the contact information in that. I didn't expect you to take any action tonight. I appreciate you getting it Russell properly on the agenda because it would be nice to move along. I'm recommending a future agenda, a discussion by you guys and more information. The questions that Vika had tonight were that I asked her to address the letter to Vika, but she, being Heather Siders at the state, asked the select board to sign the actual grant application. And Vika's question to me that I didn't get to answer before now was, do you think it would be okay if the board just authorized me to do it and I just signed it? I don't think there's anything on that signatory line that we would.
Yeah, I have a copy of it, and it just says the above conditions are understood and agreed, town of Big Island title.
Right, and your title is town administrator. Because you're not a municipal official, they may want to see a motion. They may want to see documented motion like the minutes that you've authorized her to do that. I don't know the answer to that. That's my answer to Vika's question. That's why I came.
Okay,
Any other questions?
Carol.
What's the value of the planks themselves?
I don't know the answer to that. We could find out.
Just about ballpark, yeah.
I have a quote actually, but David has. Oh, good.
I was just curious what the transportation costs are estimated to be.
Probably in the thousands, but that's a wild guess at this point. The course of action that I proposed to Vika in my email is that we actually get a quote from somebody, either these guys in Thompson or Scott Dugas or somebody, to get an actual quote. Presumably, it's going to involve some coordination with CTC. It may involve finding a place to stage 66 planks during the time. So there's some logistics involved that we're all going to have to work out. So I don't think there's any great hurry in any of this. I do appreciate getting the wheels in motion because we've been working on this for a long time. It's taken a long time to get here.
Yeah. So just for reference, I assume I'm fine sharing this. Paul shared with me what they paid for their planks. And this was in August of 22. They bought 20 12-foot planks. The planks were $250 each back then. He said he thinks the cost has gone up dramatically because of what's going on right now. And the delivery charge, probably from Topsom to the East End Beach, was $350.
Per load or per plank or
For 20 planks.
total? 20 planks.
Yep. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think he told me they offloaded them onto the barge, plank by plank. So the truck just
Justin said something. It was a very brief conversation with Justin, so I didn't want to report any facts from tonight.
So in terms of the grant, would the board be comfortable making a motion to authorize Vika, so it's in the minutes, authorizing Vika to sign the grant?
I'll make that motion.
All right, second. Can you state the motion, please, David?
To authorize our town administrator to execute the contract with
The grant application.
the grant application.
Big long department,
Department of Agriculture, Conservation and Forestry.
Those guys.
Yeah.
And I'll second.
Thank you. Discussion? Mark?
When we started this town, Claire Ross was our harbor master, and she got the existing planks, the same exact program. And so they've lasted, not long, good news, bad news, whatever you want to look at it. Thank you for all the work on this.
Yeah, thanks for the whole committee first. Thank you.
Okay, and there are some decisions to make about who's gonna install it, how that's gonna work. I mean, there's things that we can do to make it last a little bit longer.
Yes.
Okay.
And type of hardware.
I'll sign this, send it over, and then I'll just wait to hear from you on any additional stuff, right?
Yeah, I think that's all we really need to get things on. As long as the board's comfortable, we can pay for our transportation.
Yep. We'll find it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Herb.
Thanks, Eric. And Vicki, you had one other item for other business?
Yeah, so the-
I'm sorry, motion on the floor. All in favor? Unanimous? Thank you, Mark.
The other one is, not as exciting. Last meeting, I had, mentioned to you briefly that one of the compactors, the motor had broken at the, transfer station, and it's one of the, household trash compactors. Kim Bain had looked into it, he had tried repairing it, he couldn't. Jeff Westcott, through a recommendation from him, brought it to Augusta to some, guy that these are his babies and this is what he does. And the guy, we told him that it would cost more to repair that than it would to replace it. And so Jeff went ahead and contacted, the company, tried to track down where and how a motor could be purchased. Basically, what it comes down to it is we need to replace the motor and then have it be installed in order for the compactor to be up and running. And until that is done, we only have one compactor for household trash, which they're sustaining decently right now, with it being a little bit slower, but that obviously is going to change. So having said that, we have a quote that he came in today and updated me on this. He had spoken to the company provided us with a quote. It is $2,670, so it might fluctuate a couple dollars here and there. And he talked to Kim. Kim thought that it would probably be about $500 in labor to install it. So what that does is it puts us in a position where there's only about $1,500 left in the equipment maintenance budget at the transfer station, not having enough money to pay for this expense. So if the board wants to proceed with this, which I would highly recommend we do, I would make the suggestion that the board authorize me to expend up to $2,000 out of the recycling compactor account, which there's, I think, $2,014 in it. And with that $2,000 and then the money that we have in equipment maintenance should put us to cover that cost. We might go over a couple dollars in the equipment maintenance budget, but that would at least get us in a position where, because we need to, put this on a warrant, send the check in, have it come in. So it's still going to be a few weeks before that could be done. So.
Mark,
I'd like to make a motion to authorize the town administrator to expend up to $2,000 from the recycling compactor reserve fund.
all right, good second. Second by David. Discussion? All in favor? All right. Thank you, Mika. Thank you, please, to Jeff as well, and Kim, for working through that. Other business, anybody? Okay, moving along, communications, Mika, have you?
I have one that I wanted to share with the board, and that is a communication that came from Kim Bain. And he said that he had spoken with CTC about the responsibility to increase and elevate the parking lot on the other side, and CTC told him that it's the responsibility of the town and DOT. And so with these recent coastal flooding, he was wondering what the town is going to be doing about that. And so I told him I would pass that communication along to the board and see where that would.
I have a question. Mika, in your communications as to what damage occurred on the island, did you include the parking lot, the Blanchard lot as?
No.
Okay, how do we do that? Or is it too late to say we have a parking lot at risk?
So I can't really answer confidently, but it's not town owned, you know, it's, I think the situation that we're in with that is similar to, the Chandler's work, basically. We're leasing that land, so I don't think that the town can, but I can't confidently say that.
Well, I was just wondering whether we should be in communication with DOT about asking them to.
I think we
Yeah,
had it.
we've had multiple communications with DOT.
Okay,
The
good.
DOT has said the adaptation of that lot is their responsibility. So I think what it's gonna take is, and we've had that conversation now twice. I think we have to, as a community, apply some pressure to them, and we could just send what I would suggest we could do is send an email to Chris, who's the poor guy's hair's on fire, I'm sure. Chris Mayo, who's the guy that we've had this conversation about, with some pictures of the lot, just to remind him, which is what we did a year ago, and kind of just try to keep it on his radar.
I'll donate a picture of our car.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the more the merrier, because I felt a lot more confident before this last set of storms, and believe me, so many people's had flooded lots, we're just one of many now. Before, we were kind of special.
Right.
But DOT did say it's their responsibility financially, so I think it's up to us to kind of put the pressure on.
So we could gather photos, we could begin drafting correspondence, and Chris is the guy, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, and then, we could also ask Chris in that email what other moves might help, talking to our legislators or.
well, and I think it's an in-house job, so their own engineering department
Yeah.
would do the project, not, they would not contract it out.
Good.
So anyway, I think that would be, if anybody wants to take that on, David, that'd be great.
No, I'll be happy to send you some pictures. You
Well,
got, you got,
right, just,
you got the contacts.
okay,
David, would you be willing to draft
yeah, just
a
right.
correspondence
Sure.
as an agreed Prius owner? And then Carol can send it along to her contact.
Yep,
We got a new one exactly like the old one, so you can't tell the difference.
Perfect. Okay. And should that communication come from the town administrator? Should it come from?
I think it should come from the Board of Selectmen.
Okay,
I mean, and the town administrator, but I think it should come from the
Okay.
board. And CTC can be part of that also.
Mark.
And I won't keep this going too long, but Carol, when we talked to Chris that one time, he gave us the impression there was going to be
I know,
a site visit,
yeah,
which we were going to be, invited to,
so
along with CTC if they wanted, so that never happened.
it never happened. Then we had a subsequent conversation with him and he was like, oh, wow, that never happened. I mean, honestly, I think the guy's overwhelmed, but I think we should just keep it on his
Yep.
radar,
Yeah,
especially if the governor throws out 50 million or whatever.
Yep. All right, other communications, Vika? Board, Mark?
we did get one today from Art.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I've got that pulled up here, so,
Oh,
Art Ryder,
oh,
I forwarded it on the board drive this afternoon. You may remember from an earlier communication with Art, he was telling us that their, neighborhood had designated him and one other person as the contact people for issues regarding South Shore Road, South Shore Drive. And, his most recent communication says, hello, Bob, we have a couple of questions for you. Is it possible to get a copy of the island's damage report that was sent to MEMA and FEMA? That's public record. So I talked to Vika and it was Vika's opinion is fine to send in that packet. I don't see a problem with that. And then, he goes on to say, we would also like to have a warning sign at the South Road entrance to our road that warned drivers of the danger of the compromised condition of the road ahead. Some kind words that would help limit traffic would also be appreciated. Do we put that as a conversation on a future agenda to talk about that, or what are the thoughts of the board?
I'm fine with the request. I guess the thing, did we put a guardrail up there like Mark had suggested a few weeks ago?
So what we have down there right now is, so the board was, or not the board, the Public Works was going to order like a legit guardrail and install it with the temperatures having been frozen, that obviously wasn't possible, and to my knowledge, we don't have that right now. But what they did is they took, I can't think of the name of them. Barricades and then sand, put sandbag on to kind of, so it's a lot more pronounced than just, little taper, little cones. They did that East Shore and South Shore Drive.
I'm wondering if we're gonna barge down some planks, maybe there's some kind of concrete structure we can send with them that could be used like a guardrail that might be
We had talked about doing like concrete
barricade kind of.
barricades. The concern with that is if you're putting that right on the edge,
Yeah.
how much of it is washed out? Are we going to just further, impact damage? Which
Could
is
be.
why the guardrail seemed like a more appropriate thing, because then it's,
Yep,
prevents people from driving, or driving into it versus that. So that's kind of the plan.
Do we have a source that can make up custom signs?
I believe Public Works has a particular company that they use.
Could you maybe ask Public Works to get a quote on a sign along these lines? And we could then talk about that at a subsequent board meeting about purchasing such a sign. I think it would be appropriate to consider a sign at the east end as well.
yeah.
Some kind words that would help limit the traffic would also be appreciated. I'm not sure the legalities of that, what they might be. Mark?
I understand where Art and others are coming from, and I'm not unsympathetic or insensitive to it. I just think some yellow caution type signs would be just as effective along with the physical temporary, if it may be guardrail. Visibility wise.
Just put order like a caution sign and put it almost in front. when
I
you're
would think
driving.
so. The reason I'm suggesting that is visual.
Yeah.
People are visual, and with written signs, I hate
People
to
don't
say
read
it,
them. Yeah,
they don't read them very much, and if they don't like them, they will either deface them or throw them overboard.
Yeah.
What's, I agree with you, Mark. I'm just wondering what it should say. Caution, you see caution, kids crossings,
Well, I don't know if it says anything else besides caution, but you can get an opinion from, somebody rather than me, because I don't know everything. But if it says caution and it's yellow and and then you can see the barricade,
yeah,
that may be just as effective.
if that's in view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As far as deterring traffic from either East Shore or South Shore Drive, I will say I'm not that excited about that.
Well, I think Vika's letter that you sent out
Was appropriate.
kind of covered that.
That was effective.
A sign that comes to mind that happens sometimes when there's a construction project, something that says local traffic only. It's easy to ignore, but at least somebody that wants to do the right thing might avoid it, and that's a commercially available sign. That might get at what they're talking about. I don't think there's as much like tourist traffic on South Shore as there is on East Shore. It's a
yeah.
kind of part of the looping
That's
thing, if
great.
you pull down to East Shore and turn around and go
You're not
back.
gonna prevent people from
Yeah.
driving down that road during the
But
storm.
East Shore's not as threatened as South Shore is, so.
Well, I'm a year-round tourist, so those are my two spots where I have coffee and contemplate life. I love to sit and look down and wonder if my fish sandwich is cooking yet at South Harpswell.
There you
at
go.
home. And I love to go up to East End and wonder the same thing, but look out through them up by Mark Island. So I go to both places.
Now,
They're good places to go.
what would the board think about also purchasing a sign that says local traffic only and putting it up right there where South Road hits South Shore Drive? Is that something we want to do or something we don't want to do?
I think, well, only Mark's point that the signs tend to disappear, we can try it.
I also realize before that there is no budget for signs.
Yeah,
So, that's something to,
Yeah,
be aware of.
so caution signs,
Caution tape, I think Mark's talking about.
Well, I was talking about a sign,
A
which,
sign, okay.
which is, what are we talking? $150, $200?
I think the caution sign will be significantly cheaper than a custom sign.
yeah, for sure,
Yeah, and I think.
And
that
I
would
think
be
it's even
good.
less than that in price.
yeah, like $60. So 2 caution signs? Yeah, okay. Yes, ma'am.
I've heard people express concern about, I'll call it the turnaround down at the end of that road.
Which, at the end of South Shore, yes.
You know, people who are driving down sometimes go down to, in front of,
Fox Chapman.
Chapman's.
Yes.
Did you evaluate that area?
Where the turnaround, I know that, I would have to check. I think that might have been one of the kind of, emergency repairs that Public Works did right in the turnaround area. But it only goes to a certain point and then it becomes, a private right of way.
Jack, you may be referring to, there was a big washout there right after the second storm.
I think, I haven't really seen that.
Yeah, there was a big washout. Public Works repaired that within, I think, 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, okay.
That's probably what you're hearing. Yeah. It's not a great place to turn around unless you got a tiny car, but people do drive down there. All right, other communications? David?
Well, coming back to the older one and thinking about it, would it make sense for me to draft a letter along with Matt at CTC, kind of a joint letter regarding
The parking?
parking lot?
I'm not sure how much that's gonna help because they rent it from us. TTC doesn't have any standing in that.
No, that's true, except for the fact that the one and only user.
Yeah, but it's the town that, we're I mean, TTC just collecting rent.
Yeah,
Um,
it's their source of income.
yeah,
They could send one on their own probably if they wanted to.
Yeah, I don't think we want to emphasize their grading income because the DOT was a little surprised to find that out.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, let's just keep it from the town. That's
Okay.
who the relationship's with. Okay, moving on to approve the minutes from the January 17, 2024 meeting. So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by David, motion by Mark. Conversation, all in favor?
I just have a question. I think I had some I don't have it in front of me for some reason, Chris, but I had a couple additions to those. Yeah, I will. Okay, yeah.
Good. Unanimous, okay. Items to be placed on future agenda, I've got, request that we talked about year-round affordable housing, public town lands, taxes, that kind of thing, and then, the audit being due at our February 21 meeting, moving forward on the solar purchase agreement, finance committee update, as part of the budget conversations, that'll get worked into the budget conversations. Ramps are free, but we have to transport, so those are the agenda items for the future that I've got from tonight's meeting. Anybody have anything else? Vika?
One thing that should go on one of the, more, not future agenda items, but more sooner than later is the contracts with EcoMaine.
Oh, yeah.
There's 2 of them that are due to expire in
Yep.
March.
I would say the next agenda.
Okay. That's 221. Okay. I think that's it. At this point, I would entertain a motion to close the public meeting and enter into executive session.
I just
Carol?
have a quick question.
Oh,
Chris, on the thing you sent out to the nonprofits, did you give them a date that they needed to return that information?
Yes. I don't
So
recall the date on.
that would be before we have that capital, the nonprofit meeting?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Good.
I think it's the 16th, maybe. Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to.
I'd like to make a motion, we go into executive session pursuant to MRSA 456A personnel and 456E consulting with our legal counsel.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
David, all in favor? All right. Meeting ended at 7:41. And, while Vika's working on the owl, we can take a health break. Oh, have fun.